Hello, and welcome back to Fem Life. If you'd like to support me, please use my affiliate links mentioned below. Every purchase you make will bring me closer to my gender transition. Brian felt a surge of pride as he walked home from school. He just secured a spot on the first 11 football team, a move that would solidify his status as one of the school's social leaders. With his striking looks and effortless academic success, he was already popular. He stormed into the house and rushed upstairs to his computer, eager to set a new high score. Just as he was about to break his record, his mom called out, interrupting him. "Brian, it's time to go." "Go where?" he asked, his tone dripping with impatience. "We're going to see Millie's dance show, remember?" How could he forget? His little sister had been talking about it non-stop for weeks. It was typical of her to spoil an evening. They set off for the theater, and Brian complained the entire way. Once inside, he showed his disdain openly, yawning, making sarcastic remarks, and generally being unpleasant. The night took a turn when Millie took the stage. During a challenging jeté, she tripped and entangled two other dancers in a heap of pink frills. The audience erupted with laughter, including Brian. Millie was mortified, tears streaming down her face as she left the stage amidst jeers. Brian's parents did their best to console her on the ride home, but Brian only added to her misery. He taunted her, saying, "Typical girl, too worried about how you look to handle a mistake. You wouldn't catch me crying over one little slip-up. You're just a whiny mess." Little did Brian know, he'd come to regret those words. The following week, during a crucial football match, Brian was center forward. With the score tied and just moments left, he had an open net, an easy chance to win the game, but he missed from 5 yards out. After the final whistle, he quickly left the field to avoid his teammates' jeers. That night, replaying the missed opportunity over and over, he dreaded the next day at school, imagining the relentless mockery. Overwhelmed by anxiety, he started crying quietly. His mom heard him and came in to comfort him. Despite feeling foolish, he found solace in her embrace, quietly sobbing on her shoulder and vowing to face the next day bravely. The next morning, feeling a bit more composed, Brian was ready to face the world. But just as he was about to head to school, his sister burst into his room. "Get out of here," he snapped. "Go back to your frilly nonsense." "I think you need to listen to me, brother dearest," she said, and before he could interrupt, Millie started to play a tape on her dictaphone. It was excruciating for Brian to have to listen to what was undoubtedly his voice speaking in so pathetic and babyish a manner. Millie went on. "I think everyone at school would love to hear how my big strong brother faces up to his mistakes like a man, instead of being a sissy, little wimp. Don't you?" Brian was desperate to stop Millie from playing the tape at school, and so he promised to do everything and anything she wanted. At first, this was fairly simple. He just had to be nice to her, help her with her homework, tidy her room, that kind of thing, but gradually Millie got to enjoy her power over her brother and put it to more nefarious use. One Sunday afternoon, Brian went into Millie's room to help her with her homework as usual. She told him that she had a rather unusual project this week. She was making a dress in her sewing lessons. Brian told her that he couldn't be much help, but Millie insisted that she felt he had much to contribute to proceedings, as the model. Brian recoiled in horror, but soon saw he had little choice. "Now, brother dearest, I want you to take off all your clothes. That's a t-shirt, trousers, socks, carry-on, yes, I mean everything. Well, if you want, we can always play the tape on the school radio program. That's better, what a good brother you are. Now if you could just hold out your hands. Come now, I am your sister, that's a good little boy. And put these panties on." Yes, they are girls' panties, that's why they're pink and silky, with such a lovely little lace bow in the middle and a nice lace trim around the edges. You have to wear them because otherwise the dress won't hang properly. You don't think I'd do this out of spite, do you? Next we need to put this bra on you. It's one of my training bras. Just hold still now whilst I do it up at the back. Yes, I suppose you would have some difficulty getting this off. But I promise to help you when I am good and ready. I'll just put these socks down the front to give you some cleavage. That's right, now you have a lovely girlish figure. You have such a sweet small waist. I wish I was as slim as you. The next thing I need to do is shave your legs. Well, everything will look wrong otherwise. It won't hurt you. I suppose if you find it that embarrassing, you'll just have to avoid football till the hair grows back. You can always pretend to be injured. Oh, just hold still a moment then. Turn around. There, now I have a picture to commemorate the occasion. I wouldn't make a fuss if I were you. One shout from me and Mum will be up here in a flash. That's right, you are in a fix, aren't you? Now let's get back to your legs. Brian stood in disbelief as his little sister made his legs smooth and hairless. He didn't understand how he had let himself get into this situation, but here he was feeling the smooth caress of the silky panties between his legs, feeling the pressure of the slightly too small bra on his chest, and looking at his pink, humiliated reflection in the mirror. He made no attempt to resist when Millie sat him at her dressing table and began to comb his hair. He watched, growing closer and closer to tears, as she put his shoulder-length hair into plaits with little blue and yellow ribbon bows. The effect was finished by her giving him a small fringe, which fell just short of his eyes, and placing a pink beret on his head. He was powerless to resist as she put a pair of pin anklets on his feet. He had just thought how odd it was that they fit him so well when she told him to stand and put his arms in the air. She dropped a pale pink slip over his head. Brian had felt exposed and humiliated throughout the whole process, but he now felt even more vulnerable standing in the middle of the room with the draft gently swaying the sheer pink material. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw his sissified reflection. He saw himself not just as a girl, but as a helpless, pathetic sissy, totally in the power of his little sister. It was then that the doorbell rang. "Oh," exclaimed Millie, "that will be Katie come with the dress." "What? You're not going to let her see me like this?" whimpered Brian, knowing already what the answer would be. He felt himself begin to weep just at the thought of his 13-year-old cousin, and Millie's best friend, seeing him like this. He thought back with horror to the occasion of his cousin Laura's wedding, when he had been particularly cruel to Katie whilst she was wearing an outrageously frilly bridesmaid's dress. "Oh look, Millie, doesn't our model look gorgeous?" she squealed upon entering the room. "And you were worried he would be too butch. What terrific legs he has once you remove that little bit of bum fluff, and such a trim waist. He does suit pink as well. Who would guess that this was my big strong cousin Brian? The one who said that frill panties were only for sissy girls, and look, there they are under his pink silk slip, his very own pair. I guess that makes you a sissy, Brian. Just imagine what your mates on the soccer team would think of you if they could see you now. I'm not surprised you're sniveling like a little girl." Brian was able to contain himself no longer, and he lashed out at Katie, who was too quick for him. In a flash, he was gasping for breath on the floor, having been kneed firmly between the thighs. "Now, then, Sissikin's brother. You will have to be punished for that, but not until we have you in the dress." Brian stood up and allowed the dress to be put over his head. Any thoughts of resistance had left him utterly now. He felt Katie zip up the back, and he was then pushed in front of a full-length mirror. There in front of him stood a little girl. Her hair neatly plaited, a deep pink dress with a sweetheart neckline and sleeves, which were bunched up just at the shoulders, finished with white lace cuffs. The skirt was short and had a sewn-in petticoat which held it out to leave a good view of his legs, and no doubt, when he walked, his panties. His legs were smooth and slender, and his feet covered by his frilly anklets. He felt like a fairy on a cake and could not imagine anything worse. The doorbell rang. "Oh, that must be Helen with the dress," Millie said. Brian's heart sank as he realized that his cousin, whom he couldn't stand, was about to join in. He frantically looked around for a place to hide, but it was already too late. "Just look at the little sissy, he's adorable," Helen said with a gleeful grin. "I always knew you'd look cute in pink, Brian. That's why I brought you this lovely pink dress." With a beaming smile, Helen held out a dress adorned with pink frills. Brian stepped into it, feeling the petticoat rustle as the dress was slowly pulled up around his calves. He slipped his arms through the sleeves, noticing how they were gathered into a bunch of pink frills. As Helen zipped up the back of the dress, Brian looked down to see the sweetheart neckline trimmed with delicate lace. The dress cinched sharply at his slim waist, while the petticoats flared out the short skirt to mid-thigh, exposing his smooth, shaped legs and the frills of his anklets. Tears welled up in his eyes. The two girls erupted into laughter, their amusement growing as they saw more opportunities for fun with the helpless Brian. "Now, Brian, give us a twirl," Helen instructed. "No, faster. That's it, we get a nice view of your pantied bottom. Very cute. You need to learn to curtsy. Keep looking at me, take the edge of your skirt in your hands, cross your legs. That's right, very demure. You're turning out to be quite the young lady." Brian had to endure an hour of this teasing humiliation at the hands of his twin tormentors. They reminded him of every crass sexist joke and comment he had made. They forced him to speak in the lisping tones of a little girl, and he was made to beg, in the sweetest Shirley Temple manner, to be allowed into frills more often. A wish the girls were only too happy to grant. Later that week, Millie approached Brian with a teasing grin on her face. "Say, big brother, how do you fancy doing me and my friends a favor?" Brian knew he had no choice but to cooperate. He was utterly under her control, which was why he found himself just a few days later standing in front of the girls' football team. If he was honest, he had quite enjoyed the training session. He had always fancied himself as a coach, and it was nice to show off in front of an audience. Of course, wearing his sister's panties and sports bra under his boy shorts and shirt made him self-conscious at first, but no one seemed to have noticed, although he felt certain that Millie would not let the matter rest there. It was then that Millie stepped forward and said, "On behalf of all the girls, I'd just like to thank you for doing this, Brian. It's been a really great session." At that moment Brian turned as if by instinct, but it was too late. Two of the squad had grabbed him from behind and already his shorts were round his ankles, exposing the pale yellow cotton which adorned his bottom. The shrieks of laughter grew as the girls ripped his shirt off with unexpected force to reveal the sports bra he wore beneath. Unable to run with his shorts round his ankles, the boy had no choice but to stand in full view of the 13-year-old girls as they heaped derision upon him. "Oh, and I always thought you were so butch. I wondered why your legs were so smooth. You look very pretty. I'm sure my brother would love a date with you." Eventually, Brian managed to dress himself and began to slink away, dismayed at the thought that his sister's domination of him was now public knowledge. But the girls had not finished with him yet. It was Millie who explained the proposition to him. "The thing is, Brian, we have a really important tournament coming up, and including you in the team would almost guarantee us victory. We'd really like to have us on your team. Of course, if you don't want to do us this small favor, I can't be certain that your big boy footballing friends won't find out about your secret." "What do you say?" Brian knew once again that he had no choice but to do as his sister demanded. The next Saturday Brian left home telling his mother that he was visiting friends. He was relieved that at least there was no chance of her coming to watch the tournament as she was visiting friends, but it was a small comfort. He made his way to the house of Millie's friend Laura and was snuck in by the back door as arranged. By this point Brian was a bag of nerves at the thought of what was to come, but he knew he had no choice if he was to have any chance of getting out of the mess he found himself in. The girls gathered around him, expectant smiles playing upon their lips. Brian felt like a lamb being led to the slaughter. As directed, he stripped, removing even his underwear, which was whipped away from him and put he knew not where. He was handed a pair of white cotton briefs, which had a frilled yellow trim. Obediently he drew them up his legs and over his waist. Laura snapped the elastic once from behind, causing the boy to start in fear, much to her amusement. Next came the bottle green sports knickers, which were part of the girls' team kit. Again Brian obediently put them on. Millie then handed him a bra, knowing that he would not be able to put it on himself. The boy stared at it in helpless horror. "Well, have you got something you want to ask, Brain?" The boy knew what was expected of him, which made it no easier to say, "Please, could you help me, Millie? I want to put on this bra, but I don't know how. Could you help your sissy big brother get his girl clothes on?" Laura laughed in disbelief at the extent to which Millie had dominated the formerly bullying boy. The girls soon had the bra, stuffed with tissue to give Brian a more shapely figure, on the whimpering boy. There followed a session in front of the mirror whilst Laura did his hair. She gave Brian a French plait, finished off with a high ponytail tied up with a bright green ribbon. Then Millie slipped the team's green shirt over his head and held out the short green skirt for her red-faced brother. Brian stepped into the skirt and stood still as his younger sister drew the skirt up his shaven legs and pulled the zipper tight at the side. As he stood in front of the mirror, Brian looked in amazement at the 13-year-old girl who stood before him, blonde-haired and long-legged with green panties visible beneath a tight skirt at even the slightest of movements. It was going to be a long day. In fact, his career as a female football star was shorter than he had imagined. As Bryony, Laura and Millie arrived at the sports center, they ran straight into their mother. "Hi Millie, I'm glad I found you. Katie had to cancel lunch, so I thought I'd come and watch you play." "Hi Laura, who's this?" Perhaps she would not have recognized him if it hadn't been for the look of shame and terror painted across his face, but after a few moments of incomprehension his mother exploded, in rage. "What do you think you're doing? Get to the car right now." Brian was about to move when he heard his sister say, "Thank goodness you're here, Mum. It's been awful. Brian was so upset about being dropped from the soccer team that he made me dress him up just so he could get a game. He even said it would be fun to score goals against a bunch of girls." This was too much for Brian. "Shut up, you idiot. Why would I want to play football with a bunch of girls? Do you think I'm some kind of wimp?" Brian stopped and glanced around, realizing that everyone was now focused on him. It didn't take long for them to understand what had happened and who he was. His mother turned to him and said, "Well, whatever you are, you seem to be wearing your sister's clothes. Maybe it will help you learn some manners. Perhaps it will even cure that foul mouth of yours." At that moment, Brian knew his fate was sealed. His summer stretched ahead, and it was going to be filled with pink and frilly clothes.